I planned to announce my pregnancy at my birthday, but the gift from my fiancé ended everything. By just a note in a box, for me in that moment, I had to think about what I needed to do next. Perhaps my fiancé couldn't think about that. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a simple birthday party with close friends, cake laughter, and maybe, just maybe, the moment I would finally share the news that would change my life forever. But instead, everything I had planned, everything I'd been holding on to, shattered in front of me. It started like any normal birthday party. I had been feeling off for a few weeks' morning sickness that stretched into all-day sickness, but I'd managed to keep it together. I had a plan. I was going to tell everyone I loved that I was pregnant with Justin's baby, and I couldn't wait for the moment to come. Barbara had been by my side, helping me organize the little celebration at our apartment. It was small, intimate, just the way I liked it. And in the back of my mind, the pregnancy test still haunted me. I knew the truth, and soon, everyone else would too. Justin and I had been together for over 3 years. He was charming, attentive, and in the beginning, he seemed like everything I wanted. We moved in together quickly, a small, somewhat cramped apartment, but it was ours. We talked about our future, a house, maybe kids, travel. It felt like we were building something together. But looking back, I realized I should have seen the warning signs. He cared more about the car we drove and the Instagram-worthy moments than the depth of our connection. But I didn't pay enough attention to that back then. Now, I wish I had. On the day of the party, Justin was acting a little distant. He was late picking up the cake, spending hours on his phone. But I wrote it off as stress from work. It wasn't until he stood up after dinner that I started to feel something wasn't right. The room went silent as Justin raised his glass to give a toast. My heart skipped. Had he found out? Was he going to propose? I wasn't sure how I'd handle it if he did, but I was so caught up in the excitement of sharing the pregnancy news that I didn't have time to process it. But when I saw him smile at me, I thought, this is it. I was about to announce the pregnancy, and everything was going to change. And then, he handed me a small, beautifully wrapped box. My hands trembled as I took it. I thought it might be an engagement ring, and for a second, I panicked. Was I ready for that? Should I announce the pregnancy if he proposed? But when I opened the box, I saw it wasn't a ring. It was a note, a folded piece of paper. My mind raced. What the hell? I unfolded the paper, expecting something sweet, but instead, the words on that page felt like a punch to the gut. I'm leaving you. You're useless, and I deserve better. Your stuff will be packed by Monday. I stared at the words, unsure if I was reading them correctly. My brain couldn't process it. Justin looked at me with cold, distant eyes, his expression so different from the one he had when we first met. Was this a joke? But his face was dead serious. Then, in front of everyone, he said it loud enough for the entire room to hear. We're done. It's been fun, but I've outgrown you. The silence in the room was deafening. People looked at each other, unsure of what to do, some of them clearly thinking this was all a prank. But it wasn't. Justin turned and walked out without another word, leaving me standing there, holding the note. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for me to react. What was I supposed to say? Should I scream? Cry? But all I could do was smile. It wasn't that I wasn't hurt, I was. I was humiliated, shattered, and in that moment, I didn't know how to fix the broken pieces of myself. But as I stood there, holding that note, a realization hit me. Justin had no idea what was coming. He thought he had it all figured out. He thought he was the one in control, the one who held all the cards. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't the woman he thought I was. I wasn't the kind of woman who would just fall apart in front of everyone. No, I was going to get strategic. I knew something he didn't. I wasn't just the girlfriend he was leaving behind. I was pregnant with his child. And there was no way I was going to let him walk away without facing the consequences. So, I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. And Justin had no idea how badly he'd just underestimated me. I don't remember much about the rest of the night. The shock was so overwhelming that I went through the motions thanking everyone for coming, cutting the birthday cake, pretending everything was fine. Barbara was the only one who really saw through me. She knew. Once everyone left, I finally let myself fall apart. I wasn't the person I wanted to be that night, the strong one, the composed one. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break down in a way that could have made me feel like I was actually dealing with this. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, Barbara was there, the calm in the storm. She didn't try to fix me, didn't say any of those annoying everything happens for a reason type of things. She just held me as I cried, allowing me to let all the anger, pain, and confusion flow out. I needed to release the emotions I was holding in. This wasn't just a breakup, it was everything. It was betrayal. It was the man I thought I was going to spend my life with, the father of my child, tearing me apart in front of my friends, in front of everyone who mattered. It was humiliating. When I calmed down, I knew I needed to get my thoughts together. I can't just keep crying forever. As much as I wanted to sink into despair, I couldn't afford it. There was a baby growing inside of me. I had to make sure I was strong enough to handle whatever came next. Barbara was the one who asked the questions I needed to hear. What are you going to do now? What about the pregnancy? Have you told Justin? I hadn't. Not yet. My stomach twisted as I realized how much I was still hiding. I had kept the pregnancy a secret, hoping to announce it on my birthday. The same night, I'd planned to celebrate a future that no longer existed. I had made a mental note to tell Justin, but I wasn't ready, not with what had just happened. The idea of telling him now after he humiliated me so publicly felt impossible. I needed time. I'll tell him when I'm ready. Not a moment before, but there was more, a lot more. In the days leading up to that nightmare birthday party, I had uncovered things about Justin that I'd never expected. While he was out late and distant, I had started going through his stuff. Call it intuition or just sheer curiosity, but I had found what I needed. 2 weeks ago, while searching for a stamp in his desk drawer, I came across his credit card statements, and what I saw nearly made me sick to my stomach. Hotel charges, expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry purchases that I hadn't received, and the texts on his Apple Watch. Flirty, intimate messages with someone named M. I wasn't dumb. I knew exactly who M was. Maria, our friend. The one who had left the party early with the sudden stomach issue. The one who I had trusted, who had been in my home, ate my food, and seemed like she had my back. That betrayal stung harder than anything. Justin wasn't just cheating on me. He was doing it with someone I considered a friend. That realization alone should have torn me apart, but I didn't let it. I didn't want to sink to his level and retaliate right away, even though I could, and the thought of doing it made me feel a little bit better. Instead, I took a deep breath and told Barbara what I'd discovered. I showed her the credit card statements, the hotel bookings, the jewelry receipts, and the text messages. We both knew exactly what that meant. Maria, Barbara asked, incredulous. Yeah, I said, my voice flat. She's the one. She's the reason Justin thinks he's so special. She's the one he's been hiding behind my back. Barbara was pissed. Furious, actually. But me, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was too focused. I couldn't afford to let myself spiral into rage. No matter how justified I was, there would be time for anger later, right now. I needed to stay calm. I needed to focus. Barbara, being the rock that she is, wasn't going to let me fall apart. She encouraged me to stay calm and get organized. You've got this, Lily. You're not alone. And whatever happens, you're going to be okay. We are going to be okay. As we stayed up through the night, talking and making plans, one thing became clearer to me. I wasn't going to chase revenge. Not yet. I wasn't going to stoop to Justin's level, but I was going to make sure that the truth came out. Everything. The affair, the lies, his selfishness. People needed to know who he really was. It wasn't about petty revenge, it was about justice for me, for the baby, for everyone he had hurt in the process. That night, as I lay in bed, one hand resting on my stomach, I made a promise to myself. I will come out of this stronger than I was before, no matter how messy it got, no matter how hard it was. I would rise from this. And when I did, Justin would see exactly who I had become. The next few days were a blur. I barely had time to process everything before the real world came crashing down on me. The anger didn't come right away, nor did the sadness. Instead, my body seemed to shift into autopilot, like I was moving through a fog of practicality. I had a baby to think about now, and as much as I wanted to crumble under the weight of everything, I knew that couldn't be my reality. I didn't cry again after that night with Barbara, not because I was okay, but because I had made a decision. I would be okay. I wasn't going to fall apart. No, I was going to be better than that. I was going to rise from this, stronger, smarter, and prepared for whatever came next. It's funny how a moment of pain can make you realize how much strength you really have. Here I was, standing in front of a shattered version of the life I thought I had, but instead of drowning in self-pity, I found myself asking, what's next? What do I need to do to make sure I'm okay? That this baby is okay? And it was in that moment that I made two promises to myself first. I promised to provide a stable, loving home for my baby, no matter what happened with Justin, no matter how hard things got. I would be there for this little one. I didn't need Justin's approval or support to be a good parent. I would make sure my child had everything they needed. The second promise was to myself. I will come out of this stronger than before. Justin might have thought he had the power when he walked out, but the truth was, he had underestimated me. I wasn't the kind of woman who would collapse under pressure. I was the kind who would figure out how to rise, even when everything seemed impossible. So, I got to work. One started planning, making lists, organizing my thoughts. I didn't have time for pity parties. I needed to set things up for my future and my baby's future. I contacted a lawyer about the apartment lease and started looking into how I could manage everything on my own. My mind went into survival mode. And then there was the pregnancy. Despite the chaos in my life, I couldn't ignore it. The baby was growing inside of me. A constant reminder that no matter how bad things were with Justin, I had something beautiful to look forward to. I didn't tell anyone else yet, not even my family. I wasn't ready. And more importantly, I didn't want Justin to have any part of this announcement unless I was the one to make it. He had hurt me enough, and I wasn't going to let him take this from me too. I continued to focus on what I could control: work, doctor appointments, prenatal vitamins, budgeting. I started finding small victories, like successfully rearranging my apartment and deciding on a name for the baby. It wasn't much, but it was something. I was making decisions, even if they were small, and that was empowering. Meanwhile, Justin, well, he was still trying to reach me. His messages were relentless, but I ignored every single one. The last thing I wanted was for him to have any more control over my emotions, and I could tell he was starting to panic. It wasn't just the breakup anymore, it was the baby, the one thing he couldn't walk away from. 2 weeks passed. I had my routine, I had my strength, and I was moving forward. But then, the texts started coming from Justin again. This time, they weren't about trying to get back together. They were more frantic, desperate. "Is it true? Are you really pregnant?" he asked. "We need to talk about this. This involves me too." I sat there staring at my phone for a long time, reading his words over and over. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, tell him everything, remind him of what he did to me. But I didn't. I had made up my mind. If Justin wanted to be a part of this baby's life, it would be on my terms, not his. So, I ignored the texts. They grew more desperate. "I have rights, you know. You can't keep me away from my child. Call me back or I'm coming over." That last text, it shook me, but not in the way he probably thought. It made me realize one thing: Justin didn't know how to handle this. He had a plan, an idea of how everything was going to go. But this was beyond him. I couldn't let him control the narrative anymore. This was my story now. The next few weeks were filled with so much noise, not just in my head, but in my life. Justin's attempts to contact me didn't stop. They kept coming, one after the other texts, calls, even voicemails. But I remained firm, holding on to my boundaries like a lifeline. I wasn't going to let him back into my life. Not like this. Not after everything. I spent my days juggling doctor appointments, prenatal vitamins, and work. It wasn't glamorous, but I was making it work. Slowly but surely, I was carving out a life for myself and this baby, piece by piece. And that was enough for me. I didn't need Justin to complete me. I had me, and that was all I needed. But Justin, he wasn't handling things as well. The constant messages started to wear on me, so I finally responded. Not out of a need to explain myself because I wasn't going to do that, but because I had a point to make. His messages kept getting more frantic. We need to talk about the baby. I need to know what's going on. I'm not just going to disappear from this. The audacity. I had to stop him. So I told him, no, I wasn't going to meet him on his terms. If he wanted to talk, it would be on my time. I wasn't playing his game anymore. Then came the call that I wasn't expecting. It was from Justin. He sounded different this time, not angry, not pleading, but resigned. I almost didn't pick up, but something in his voice made me answer. I need to get my things, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll be here at 7 to pick them up, he added, as if he had the right to just waltz in. I thought about it for a moment. The last thing I wanted was to see him, but I wasn't going to let him walk in like nothing had happened. No more easy exits for him. No more control. So, I called in reinforcements. I wasn't dealing with this alone. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, my apartment was buzzing with friends. Aaron, Sergio, Lana, everyone showed up, offering their support, their strength. And when Justin arrived, he didn't find an empty apartment waiting for him. He found a line of people who loved me, who had my back. He looked stunned when he saw Aaron, who stood like a human wall, blocking him from getting any further inside. I almost smirked. It was a beautiful thing, seeing Justin's face drain of all confidence. You're not welcome here, Justin, Aaron said, his voice calm but firm. You're getting your stuff, and that's it. The rest can be sorted out later, but you'll show some basic decency. You'll respect Lily's boundaries. Justin tried to argue, tried to act tough, but the tension was palpable. He was no longer the man in control, and that felt good. That felt like a victory. I stood in the background, watching as Aaron handed Justin a suitcase with a few of his things. The rest would come later, but Justin would not be getting everything tonight. Not when he had treated me like this. Justin tried to catch my eye. He looked at me, probably expecting some kind of emotional response, but I gave him nothing. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break, he muttered under his breath. Something about how this was ridiculous, but I didn't even flinch. I looked at him, calm as could be, and said, You should consider yourself lucky I didn't change the locks already. We'll talk about the rest later. For now, go. And with that, he left. The door slammed behind him, and a small sense of relief flooded through me. I did it. I didn't let him win. I kept my cool. I stayed in control. But as soon as the door closed, the tears came. Not for him. Not for the man I thought I knew, but for the life I had imagined gone in an instant. For the future I thought we'd have together, now rewritten. And for the child who deserved so much more than a father who could be this cruel. I didn't cry for him. I cried for me. I cried for what could have been. But I didn't let myself stay in that place for long. I couldn't. I had a baby to take care of now. The following morning, after a fitful night of sleep, I woke up to a message from Justin. He was coming by to collect more of his things. I just stared at it, shaking my head. No more. Instead of letting him dictate the terms, I stood my ground. I wasn't giving him any more chances to hurt me. He wasn't going to just walk back into my life whenever it suited him. I contacted Barbara, and together, we worked out a plan. I wasn't going to let him come here alone. This time, I wasn't going to be the one left feeling small and powerless. The following day, I stood my ground. I didn't go to the door when he knocked. Instead, I waited, and when he showed up, I was ready. The standoff wasn't dramatic, but it was a turning point. I could see the shock on his face when he realized I wasn't going to be there to pick up the pieces. No matter how many times he tried to manipulate the situation, I wasn't falling for it anymore. "Bring your stuff and get out," I said. He tried to argue, tried to get me to see things his way, but this time, I wasn't interested in playing his game. I simply told him that when he was ready to face the truth, he could come back. But until then, this was how things were going to be. A few days after Justin picked up his stuff, the calm I had worked so hard to cultivate started to feel real. It was like the weight of the last few weeks was finally starting to lift. And I could focus on what really mattered. I had a sense of control now. I knew I was doing what I needed to do for myself, for the baby, and for my sanity. But as much as I'd told myself I was done with Justin, part of me knew it wasn't really over. There were still things to deal with, practical things like the apartment, our finances, and the pregnancy. And then there was Justin, who was still trying to keep some kind of hold over me, even from a distance. He texted again. "Can we talk? I want to fix things. I miss you." The words were like a knife in my side. I didn't want to deal with him anymore. Not now. Not ever again. At least not in the way he wanted. But I had to admit, his persistence was something I hadn't expected. I had thought once he'd left, he'd be done with me. But no, Justin wasn't done. He thought that by apologizing, by begging, he could erase everything. And that made me even more determined to make sure he understood something. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about our child. And if he wanted any part of this child's life, it was going to be on my terms. I didn't respond to his texts at first, and when he called, I let it ring out. It felt empowering, holding my ground. But then, just when I thought he was starting to give up, he sent me another message. This one was different. It was more desperate. He was afraid. "I know I messed up," he wrote, "but I want to be there for the baby. I have a right to be involved. Don't you think we should at least talk about it?" The audacity. The nerve. But instead of replying right away, I took a moment. I realized something important. Justin hadn't changed. Not really. The man who had humiliated me in front of our friends, who had left me for another woman, was still trying to control the situation. He was still focused on his rights, his wants, while I was focused on what was best for the baby. And I wasn't going to let him walk back into my life with this new, convenient narrative of being a father he could barely believe in. I decided to take control of the narrative for once, to dictate the terms of our future. And if Justin wanted to be involved in our child's life, he needed to start by respecting that. I agreed to meet him on my terms, not at my apartment, not at his convenience, but at a neutral, public place, the coffee shop near the park. And I made it clear that I wouldn't be doing this for closure, or for old time's sake. I was doing it because there was a child on the way, and it was time to figure out what that meant for both of us. When the day arrived, I walked into that coffee shop with a calm resolve that I didn't even know I had. Justin was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He looked like a mess. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair a little wild, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a second, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. He didn't look up when I walked in, but when I sat down across from him, he finally lifted his head, and his expression said it all. Guilt, regret, but also that old familiar thing I had come to know all too well, desperation. "I'm sorry." "Okay," he said, almost immediately. His voice rushed. "I know I screwed up. I shouldn't have left. I wasn't happy. I thought this would be easier. But I realize now what I've done, and I want to fix it. I want to be there for you, for the baby. I let him talk, just watching him. I didn't interrupt, didn't say a word. He kept going, talking about how he was sorry for everything, the breakup, the way he treated me, the affair with Maria. The longer he spoke, the more I realized just how empty his words were. I hadn't agreed to meet him for apologies. I hadn't agreed to hear him grovel. What mattered now was the baby. So I cut him off, finally speaking the words that had been bubbling up inside me since the day he left. "What do you want, Justin?" I asked, my voice clear and steady. "What exactly do you want from me? Do you want to fix things? Is that what this is about?" He stammered. "I mean, I want to be involved in the baby's life. I want to be there, to help. I want us to co-parent." The words hung in the air, but I didn't let myself get caught up in them. I already knew the answer. I had known the moment I saw him walk out of that door on my birthday, when he thought he could just leave me behind without facing the consequences. I leaned forward, looking him in the eye. "You're not here to fix us. You're here because you don't want to face the consequences of your actions. You're here because you're scared. But what you don't get, Justin, is that this isn't about us anymore. This is about our child. And if you want to be involved, it's going to be on my terms. Not because you think you can just waltz back into my life. No. If you want to co-parent, you'll do it with respect, responsibility, and consistency. Not when it's convenient for you." His face fell. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he just nodded, like he finally understood. Maybe for the first time in a long while, he was hearing me. I continued, "I've already spoken with a lawyer. I've got things set up. If you want to be a part of this child's life, you'll need to show up on time, consistently, and you'll be financially responsible too. This isn't a negotiation. This is your reality now." Justin's face twisted, but he stayed quiet. That was progress, at least. Before I left, I handed him a folder with all the necessary information: doctor's appointments, ultrasounds, the baby's due date, everything. "Look it over." I told him, "Talk to your lawyer. I'm not interested in having these conversations until you've processed everything. But when you're ready, we can figure this out." He grabbed the folder, looking at it for a moment, before looking back at me. "I'll figure it out, Lily. I promise." "Good," I said, standing up. "But don't make promises you can't keep." The coffee shop meeting was a turning point, no doubt. For the first time since Justin had left, I felt like I was the one with control, and I wasn't about to let that go. I had made it clear to him that the days of being manipulated, of letting him waltz in and out of my life when it suited him, were over. And I have to say, that first week after our meeting felt different. There was this quiet, almost surreal sense of peace that settled in. I didn't have to worry about Justin trying to worm his way back into my life. For the first time in ages, I wasn't walking around with this pit in my stomach, wondering when he would show up next. I focused on me, on the baby. The next few weeks passed in a blur of doctor's appointments, planning and mentally preparing for what was to come. There was a lot to figure out, but I felt like I could handle it now. I was strong. I was going to be okay. But Justin wasn't as settled as I was. He was still texting, still trying to get a read on where I was emotionally. He didn't know how to handle the boundaries I had set. It was like he couldn't believe I wasn't bending, wasn't falling for his usual tricks. I kept responding, but only in terms of the baby doctor appointments, the nursery, practical things. No emotional stuff, no small talk. The real bombshell came a week later. I got a text from Sergio, one of our mutual friends, who I knew to be friends with Justin's co-worker. Sergio, bless him, didn't exactly mince words. "Hey, Lily, just wanted to give you a heads up. I overheard Justin and Maria talking about you. They're definitely together now. But here's the kicker: they were spotted together a couple months ago, and I think they've been seeing each other for longer than you realize. I'm sorry, but I thought you should know." It hit me like a punch in the gut. Maria, the girl who had been my friend, the one who had eaten at my table, laughed with me, and spent time in my apartment. She was the one Justin had chosen. She was the one who had left the party that night with a sudden illness. She was the one who had been there, pretending to care, while secretly breaking my heart behind my back. And the worst part, I wasn't surprised. In fact, part of me had suspected it for a while, but hearing it confirmed, that stung like 1,000 bees. I sat there for a moment, the weight of it all sinking in. It wasn't just that Justin had cheated, it was that he had done it with someone I trusted. It was that this whole time, while I was grieving what we had, he had been moving on, playing this sick little game with her. He had made a fool of me in ways I hadn't even fully realized yet. But you know what? I wasn't going to let myself get bogged down in that. I had my child to think about. I had to be strong. The rage I felt simmered under the surface. But it didn't overtake me. I was strategic. I had a plan. So, I called Barbara. I needed to talk to someone. Needed to vent. Needed to process the betrayal. That bastard, I muttered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. Maria, of all people, Barbara, as always, stayed calm. I know it hurts, but you're better off knowing now. You're going to be fine. You're already moving forward. And now you know exactly who he is. I could hear the reassurance in her voice, but I was still furious. How could he do this to me? But as much as I wanted to wallow, I knew I couldn't. I wouldn't. I started to think about how I could handle the situation. This wasn't just about Maria or Justin anymore. It was about protecting myself, my baby, and making sure the truth came out. And the truth was that Justin wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the man I had hoped he would be. And I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I had a responsibility to myself and my child to make sure I walked away from this situation stronger. A few days later, I saw Justin again. It wasn't planned, but there he was, standing outside my apartment. It had been a couple of weeks since we last spoke, and honestly, I had been hoping for a bit of distance from him. But of course, that wasn't going to happen. Not yet. I didn't go to the door immediately, though. Instead, I peered through the peephole, making sure it was really him. And when I opened the door, he stood there, looking sheepish, but with that same defensive energy I had come to associate with him. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Can I come in?" I shook my head, standing firm in the doorway. "No, Justin, we're not doing this anymore. You've had your chances." He looked like he was about to argue, but I cut him off. "No, listen. I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. You've hurt me enough. You've made your choice. I'm done letting you walk in and out of my life whenever it suits you. You want to talk about the baby? Fine. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you manipulate me anymore." He stood there for a moment, stunned. "Are you still seeing her?" I asked flatly. His expression faltered, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But he didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he finally admitted. "But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here because I want to make things right for the baby. I want to do better." I didn't let myself get emotional. Instead, I just nodded slowly, keeping my cool. "Well, you've got a long way to go before I believe that, but I'll let you know when it's time for you to see your child. Until then, you'll keep your distance." The days seemed to stretch into one another as my pregnancy progressed. I wasn't sure what was harder, the physical discomfort or the emotional weight of what I was going through. My body was changing, and while I was excited about the baby, I couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed by the complexity of it all. It wasn't just about growing a tiny human, it was about how my life had been turned upside down, and how I had to navigate everything without Justin by my side. I'd like to say that by the time my due date rolled around, I had everything figured out, that I was calm and prepared. But the truth is, I was far from it. The months had passed with their own set of challenges, from morning sickness to figuring out how to afford everything the baby would need. But, in some strange way, it had all brought me closer to who I really was. One thing that had kept me grounded through everything was the people who had stood by me. Barbara was still my rock, offering support, advice, and, most importantly, being there when I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. She had this way of reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. And Aaron, Sergio, and even my cousin Lana had stepped up in ways I hadn't expected. It was their love and support that kept me going. And I started to realize that I had everything I needed to get through this except Justin. And yet, Justin wasn't totally absent from the picture. He still showed up occasionally, usually with some kind of desperate gesture, like showing up with a random, impractical gift or asking about the baby's progress. The truth was, I was beginning to understand that Justin wasn't a man who thrived on responsibility. He was the kind of guy who liked the idea of being a father, but when it came to the hard work of it, that was a different story. A week before my due date, I got a text from Justin. I hadn't heard from him in days, and honestly, I'd been relieved. But this text caught me off guard. "I want to be there for the birth," he said. "I know I messed up, but I want to be there for you and the baby." I stared at the text for what felt like hours. He wasn't just asking for another chance, he was trying to insert himself into something that I had no interest in sharing with him. This wasn't about him. This was about me. This was about the child I was about to bring into the world, the child who deserved better than anything Justin could offer. But still, I was tempted. I wanted to say yes. It would have been easier in some ways to let him show up and pretend that everything was okay. It would have been easier to give him the chance to redeem himself, but I knew that was the easy way out. The truth was, I didn't owe him anything. I didn't need him there to prove to myself that I could do this alone, because I already knew I could. So, I responded with a simple, firm message. "No, Justin. You don't get to just show up for the baby's birth like it's a family reunion. If you want to be part of this child's life, you need to prove it with your actions, not your words." The relief I felt after sending that text was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I knew I had made the right choice, but as the days drew closer to my due date, a new wave of anxiety washed over me. I wasn't scared about giving birth, I was scared of doing it alone. And even though I knew deep down that I wasn't alone, part of me still longed for the support I thought I'd have when I first found out I was pregnant. The night I went into labor, I was at home, alone, with only my thoughts to keep me company. Barbara had been over earlier in the day, and she promised to be there for me whenever I needed her. But now, it was just me. And despite everything that had happened, I felt a surge of fear. I was doing this alone. But then, just as the contractions started to get stronger, I felt a sudden wave of clarity. This wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning of something new, something I could control, something I could make my own. And when the pain started to get intense, I didn't panic. I called Barbara, and within minutes, she was there, her calm presence filling the space like a warm embrace. She didn't say much, just held my hand and made sure I knew I wasn't alone. We laughed through the pain, shared some awkward moments, and when the time came, I knew I had someone who truly cared by my side. And then, after hours of labor, the moment finally came. The baby was here. It wasn't the dream birth scenario I had imagined, the smooth delivery, Justin standing proudly by my side, everything perfect. No, it was messy and exhausting, but it was real. It was mine. And when they placed Zoe in my arms, I felt a rush of emotions I hadn't been prepared for. She was tiny, perfect, with a full head of dark hair and a tiny, wrinkled face that made my heart explode with love. I stared at her for what felt like an eternity, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't expected. This was the reason I had been fighting. This was the future I had worked for. And yes, Justin was there. He showed up at the hospital, looking like a shell of the man I had once known. I wasn't expecting him to be there, but when I saw him standing awkwardly by the door, clutching a giant teddy bear that wouldn't fit through the door, something in me softened. He didn't know what to say. He was awkward, unsure of what role he was supposed to play now, but for the first time, I didn't feel resentment. I didn't feel anger. I felt something different, a strange mix of sympathy and understanding. Maybe he would get it, maybe he wouldn't, but it didn't matter. I was already a mother, already learning how to do this on my own, and that was enough. Life after Zoe's birth wasn't exactly what I had imagined. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be here, raising a baby on my own, navigating co-parenting with a man who had completely shattered my trust, I would have laughed in disbelief. But here I was, figuring it out as I went, taking it one step at a time, with Zoe as my constant reminder that no matter what happened, everything had changed for the better. The first few weeks after the birth were a blur. I was exhausted, running on barely any sleep, and completely overwhelmed by the enormity of motherhood. But there was also this undercurrent of joy. Zoe's tiny hands, her little cries that now felt comforting instead of alarming, the way her tiny fingers curled around mine. These were the moments that reminded me why I was doing this. And though I had a million doubts, I also had an unshakable conviction that I was going to give this child the life she deserved, even if it meant doing it alone. Justin showed up more often than I expected. At first, it was awkward. He brought the kind of gifts that made me roll my eyes, a huge teddy bear that could have been a prop in a sitcom, a tiny leather jacket for a 6-week-old, I mean. What? And things like overpriced baby clothes that made me wonder if he was trying to buy his way back into our lives. But then something shifted, slowly. He began to show up in more practical ways. He brought diapers, formula, and occasionally dot meals. And one day, when Zoe was particularly fussy, he showed up with cabbage leaves and a heating pad cabbage leaves, because he had read somewhere that they helped with clogged milk ducts. It was, in its own way, a sign that he was trying. Maybe not in the ways I had hoped for, but it was something, and I'll admit, I didn't mind it so much. I was still furious with him. I still resented the way he had treated me, the way he had betrayed me. But as the days passed, I started to see a different side of him, the side that, maybe, was capable of growth. Or maybe I was just getting better at accepting what had happened, and him too. He had his flaws, his mistakes, God. Had he made mistakes, but I could see that he was trying to be present for Zoe. That's all I could really ask for at this point. Right. At first, our co-parenting arrangement was awkward. There were moments when Justin would ask me how to do something with Zoe, or try to tell me what worked and what didn't based on what he'd read on the internet. The arrogance still lingered, but I didn't let it get to me. If he wanted to help, I was going to let him, but I wasn't going to forget how he had treated me. The boundaries I set in place didn't change, even as he tried to act like everything was fine. And honestly, I wasn't in any rush to get close to him again. I wasn't looking for a reconciliation. The man who had left me in front of all my friends, the man who had thought I was useless, was not the man I was going to welcome back with open arms. But for Zoe's sake, I was willing to make this work. I wanted him to be a good father, even if that meant keeping him at arm's length for now. Then there was Eli. Yes, Eli, the delivery guy. I know. It sounds ridiculous, but stick with me. Eli had been delivering groceries to my apartment during those first chaotic weeks when I was barely hanging on. At first, I barely registered him beyond a polite thanks as I struggled to keep up with the madness of being a new mom. But over time, he started leaving little notes with dad jokes or helpful suggestions about baby products he thought I might like. Something about him just felt different, safe. He wasn't looking at me like I was some kind of train wreck. He was just offering help in his own quiet way. One day, when I was having one of those I haven't showered in days and the world feels like it's falling apart moments, Eli offered to help me carry my groceries inside. It was a small gesture, but I'll tell you, it made a world of difference. And suddenly, we were talking, just chatting. Nothing serious, but it felt nice to talk to an adult who didn't want to know how many diapers I'd changed, or if Zoe had slept through the night. That was the start of something. We exchanged numbers under the pretense of, in case there were any delivery issues. But let's be real, we both knew it was an excuse. Eli and I began texting more often, getting to know each other outside the chaos of my apartment. There were no expectations, no pressure, just conversation. And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel something. It wasn't romantic. Not yet, but it was something. I didn't know where it was going. And honestly, I wasn't in any rush to find out. After everything with Justin, I was in no mood to jump into another relationship. But it was nice to feel like I wasn't completely defined by my past anymore. There was a possibility of something new, something healthy. But right now, Zoe came first, and that was all that mattered. As for Justin, things were better, I suppose. We had our moments of tension, especially when he showed up late for visits or cancelled at the last minute. But there were also moments where it almost felt normal. He came to doctor's appointments when invited, helped me put together the crib after we both admitted defeat with those ridiculous IKEA instructions, and started sending me updates on his life work, therapy, his attempts at being a better person. I won't lie, sometimes I couldn't help but wonder if he was actually changing, but then there were days when he was still the same old Justin, the one who wanted everything handed to him, the one who couldn't admit his faults without a long, drawn-out explanation. But as long as he showed up for Zoe, that was all I cared about. I didn't need him to be perfect. I didn't even need him to be a good partner. I just needed him to be a father. Months passed, and life kept moving forward, one day at a time. There were still moments of doubt, moments where I wondered if I was doing everything right. Was I being too hard on Justin? Was I moving on too quickly with Eli? Was I doing enough for Zoe? But every time I looked at her when I saw that little face, her wide eyes staring up at me like I was her whole world, I knew I was doing the right thing. And as for Justin, well, life had a way of catching up with people, the same way it had caught up with him when he left me in that cold, heartless way at my birthday party. He was still struggling. He still hadn't figured it all out. But maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing, because now he was finally understanding what it meant to be a father, and that was a start. This whole mess, this roller coaster of emotions, heartbreak, and chaos had led me to a place I didn't expect. I wasn't the same person who had stood holding that cruel note on my birthday. I had been shattered, yes, but now I was rebuilt, stronger, wiser, and better. I didn't know what the future held for me. Maybe Eli would become something more meaningful, or maybe he'd just be a brief chapter. Maybe Justin would continue to grow as a co-parent, or maybe he'd fall back into his old ways. What I did know was this: I was enough, for myself, for Zoe, and that was all I needed.